Welcome back to Questions You Didn't Ask with me, Niasha Fray, and my guests, Regina May, Dr. Janai Fannin, and Felicia Williams Brown. As we continue the series, COVID-19 Conversations, Black People with Disabilities, let's dive back into the discussion.
What role does family and community play in helping you and people with disabilities thrive in their lives?
Oh, wow. Families play a huge role, I have to say. And again, I'm speaking here from the lens of a caregiver of a person with autism. I'm a mother of a child with autism, and I am also a Black person. Mm-hmm. So you have those two things that intersect, right? Mm-hmm. And so my experience, being a Black person, managing and, finding my way through this, I have found that to receive support, I've had to go outside of the community because our spaces weren't safe. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, and you'll hear a lot of parents say this candidly, there just wasn't a lot of knowledge about autism. And so even as people have become more aware, there hasn't been investment with inclusion. Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of like, well, we see you, but, just don't break my stuff. Or we see you, but don't make noise during my service. Mm-hmm. Or we see you, but you ain't doing it right. You need to spank them if they don't eat all their food. Or you need to, I'll straighten them out, and so we get these hurtful messaging, and a lot of times our families just stay home. Mm-hmm. They don't do family gatherings. They don't go out because of, not only are we having to deal with just managing autism, but then we're also being hurt by our families. So I say if our families, our Black communities become more invested in inclusive spaces, stop with this harmful messaging that we're giving to our families. It's okay to have questions, but approach it from a place of curiosity, not judgment. Mm-hmm. And just be a safe place for our families to land. I have been able to find that, but unfortunately, it's only been because I found other people like me who are experiencing it too. But if they have no connection, it's usually the caregiver is responsible for educating. And a lot of times we just want to be safe, and we just want you to accept us, and we want you to understand. And so I would say, if we can, and then we can be more of, how they say it takes a village. If we take care of the caregiver who's taking care of the person, and if we take care of the person, then we can really grow and expand as a Black community as we support our own. So it's a huge thing. It's like educate yourself, but also be invested in including these families in these spaces.
So what role would you all say that family and community plays in helping people with disabilities thrive in their lives?
I would say that I agree with everything you said about the messages we get from family and people who don't understand. My parents are 81 and 82, and I've been impressed actually as to how they've just gone along with it, right? Now, my mother, she was a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and my dad was an education professor. So they knew about learning differences and mental health, but they're still African immigrants, right? They're still Zimbabwean and still wondering why the child has a tablet, if that's what's causing problems, right? Or maybe, and I see that with all families, really, this issue with if the parents say this tablet helps regulate the child, right? But there's always some family members saying, well, that's why they have problems, right? And so I think that there's so many grandparents right now, my parents in the silent generation, boomers who are doing better. And I really hope that, caregivers continue to educate about the differences and different ways of child rearing and how punishment does not help, it does not work. There are different strategies we need to do. And I think they're receptive. People, we need to presume competence. There's studies about, people in this culture think this, or people in Hispanic culture, they're not going to want to do the early intervention and do the therapy, where they're amongst themselves scrambling to find things like, books in Spanish, or asking the therapist to do the therapy in Spanish, but the therapist is still doing it in English. That there are, even though there are language barriers, cultural differences, I think we need to presume more competence from our, underserved communities. And then also, family can be helpful for those caregivers who also have issues, right? I mean, autism is heritable. There are other, relationships with things like schizophrenia, bipolar, ADHD for sure. There are plenty of adults not getting diagnosed until they find out their child is autistic. And so things are hard for them. I think I look at these other quote unquote autism moms and I was like, man, I wish I had the bandwidth to label the snack box and all this stuff, and just like they're doing all the things right when I'm like, oh my gosh, she got on the bus.
Yeah.
We're not late. Like we were getting truancy letters. Our first year here in North Carolina, I was like, y'all are lucky she's here. Do you know how hard the morning is?
Yeah, right.
But so just if there are other family members who could be helpful with things like strategies like that, and realize that the caregivers themselves are not because the child is autistic, but their own personal,
Right.
difficulties in life, and then just also understanding that like we didn't not come because we don't love you. It's their bedtime. You have a party at 9, that's it. We haven't been to church in 12 years for some of the reasons that you mentioned, and we tried, but being more, that community, I guess, being more welcoming, and it's not like they kick you out of church, but it's the, oh no, here she comes look, right? When you got this big old girl who's 14, but she wants to play on the, in the younger place. She loves like daycare settings. It's just, it's a lot. But I think things are getting better. Like even I might say amongst my parents' age, people are a lot more, I guess, accepting or open.
Yeah, I agree with a lot that has been said already. I think it's hard because we're just now becoming a society that recognizes wellness in the way that we do. And also what I'm finding is it's generational, to your point about the one, like along with working in substance abuse and recovery, having an intellectual development son, but that diagnosis didn't come for many years in his elementary years. And so one thing that I'm actually pushing for in one of my roles on a local mental health committee is that we stop just doing support services for the parents, and that we start having support services for siblings, for grandparents, anybody, because to understand how mental health and substance use attacks the whole family. But what I tell people is it's not an attack if you're ready for it. If you learn and educate yourself. And so to be that caregiver that sometimes is you're battling family because you're trying to break the ideas, and to your point to say, we don't even attend church. I do work in a Christian faith-based setting, at times, and it's like, can we have headphones that address that sensory and sensitivity for some, and can we? But again, that definite education, and we're still again learning as a society. That's why you see certain rulings and certain having a setting, if it's a child's therapist office, is no longer just a table and chairs. It's sensory bounded things as we learn. And I think that's huge. Like, stop just thinking that is just that individual that needs service and aids. And when we get out of that mindset, the caregivers feel more cared for, right? I remember sitting in a setting with my son at a pretty well-known establishment to aid children with disabilities, and I had another mom, it wasn't even a provider, come in and say, he doesn't look like anything is wrong with him. And that kind of stuck with my son, and it's like, as a mom, I'm just trying to make sure he has all what he needs, but I didn't even think it was years later till he's like, when that lady said, they remember. They do, right? And you're like, I'm trying to get you to tie your shoe. What do you mean? You remember? But yeah, that just society as a whole can play a role, but we have to stop just thinking that it's the caregivers that need education, especially in the Black community, knowing that we have a history of how research has treated us when it comes to different needs.
Research, healthcare, education system, all of that stuff, and I can talk a little bit about, my experience as it relates to family and community with my daughter with Down syndrome. Down syndrome is one of the more common, genetic disabilities. And even with that being the case, there's still a lot of people that have not interacted with folks with Down syndrome. And my family, I was blessed with, they were supportive of me, they were supportive of our family, my daughter, and, made themselves available to us to lean on. But that also meant that I had to pour into them as I was learning and passing on information. Not really sure how much of it they were going to consume or how much of it they were going to believe, but making that a bidirectional support, because here they are, they're excited about being grandparents, or they're excited about being an aunt or an uncle, and now they're having to better understand what does that mean in the context of Down syndrome. And so educating them and bringing them with me and showing them that, yes, she has differences, but fortunately they maintain that sense of curiosity. I'm sure that there were times where there was a little judgment. I'm sure there's still times where there's a little judgment, right? But there are more questions than there are this overt, like, you need to do it my way or the way that I'm used to, right? They're going along with the process of change, the process of she's different. But there are times where I have to remind people that parenting her and the amount of attention and energy is different than what you have with me and my sister, right? It's different because she requires more, And so I do think, and I know that our community that we've grown with, from the beginning, whether that was the beginning of me finding out that she was likely to have Down syndrome, to the beginning of when she entered this world, to the beginning of her education journey or her early intervention journey, we've been able to accumulate different people along our path that have helped to guide us along the way. And for me, that has been an inspiration to continue that advocacy. And in some places, as it relates to organizations and programs and the way that we support families, is being able to tell organizations that the way that you serve Black families who have a loved one with Down syndrome, it's going to be different if you want it to be successful, right? So if you're an organization that advocates for and provides for programming and support and you're noticing that there are not that many Black families that are coming and attending, reach out to someone like us, right? That can help you reach that community and then be able to sustain what those efforts are and how those ways to reach communities is different, right? So where you might have, a night where, say it's a dad's night out or something like that, that might not work very well for our communities, right? We might need a different type of support for fathers, a different type of cultural grounding for our community. And so that's what I've seen in my walk, is not just the confusion, concern, and what have you, but also the curiosity, also the questions. We've definitely had points of judgment that have had to be confronted and addressed. But it is a journey, and I'm glad to have the people in our corner that we do have. And that leads me to my next question. As it relates to our culture, our identity. Dr. Fannin, you mentioned that your parents are from Zimbabwe. And so being a person that's African American in a different way, in a more direct way, your culture is influenced by our American culture, but definitely has some unique nuances. And so how does your Black identity, and this is for all of us, affect your perspective of an experience with the disability community?
I guess I'll start. I'll answer that. I would say, for me, you've touched on a lot of it already. With we have our history with the medical group that really mistreated our people, and so there's this distrust with the Black community and the medical community, but it hurts us because in order for us to get research that reflects our needs, we have to participate, and so there has to be some balance, I think, with maybe educating our community about how we can still be a part of research without giving parts of our DNA. Like, we can answer surveys, we can do questionnaires. That's a part of research. That's something that we can do that will impact change and outcomes, and it will reflect us. So being more active, in that way, I think is huge. I think of many other things too, but I also think that if you go online and you Google like autism, how many Black faces do you see? Not very many. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to see ourselves. Mm-hmm. We need to see providers that look like us. Mm-hmm. We need to see specialists that look like us. We need to see researchers that look like us. And then we need the places that we go to get guidance at least need to have cultural competency when they're helping us. There's a lot of, like, even technology, medical technology. I didn't realize, like, for the EEGs, a lot of them don't support our hair type. Mm-hmm. So that is an injury to our community. Studies, the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so just, making these progressive changes helps. It's important. Mm-hmm. Also, a lot of families, I know where I work, many families don't engage because they don't see a lot of people that look like them. Mm-hmm. So they are like, I don't know where I fit. I don't know if you understand. I don't know if I belong in this space. And so that's why representation, I think, is important too.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're talking about meaningful representation.
Yes.
I think sometimes organizations make the mistake of putting a picture up, but when you walk into the building, you don't see anybody that looks like that picture that might have made you think this could be a safe space.
Right.
And so I'm glad that you bring that up about, these meaningful representations. Because that was one of the questions that I had when I first found out that my daughter had Down syndrome. Like, how many Black people actually get this? Because I generally only see white people with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And then I found out people all across the globe it's a human condition, so it wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh, that's something that just white people get, and maybe that's from your white ancestor from some years ago. No, this is life. This is diversity.
Thank you for joining us on Questions You Didn't Ask with me, Niasha Fray, and my guests, Regina May, Dr. Fannin, and Felicia Williams Brown. Tune in next week as our series, COVID-19 Conversations, Black People with Disabilities, continues.